Hello there. My name's Carl Lehman. I'm the author of the international best-selling book, Dream It, Plan It, Live It. And if you're sitting there watching this video and you think, I've got no idea how much money is enough to be financially free or secure in retirement. In fact, I don't know what I'm going to do in retirement, or indeed, if along the way, if I kick the bucket, how will my family survive? What's going to happen to them? Then do you know what? You're in the right place. But first of all, I want to explain to you why I think you should listen to me. So first of all, I've got a bit of a confession to make. You see, I feel that I was a little bit of a fraud in my career. I've been doing what I do now for in excess of 35 years. Now, first of all, let me just explain to you this. I'm not talking about being a banged up in prison kind of fraud, but I'm talking about being a fraud where I wasn't being authentic to myself and I wasn't being authentic to my clients. The reason for that, and the good news is I'm a reformed character, so I'm now a huge advocate of what I call proper financial life planning. And that's very different to what I used to do in the past, which is product advice. You see, the way the industry works is this. You've got these big companies who manufacture products. They then distribute those products through what I call financial advertisers. Now, I've not mispronounced that. Most people would think I'd say financial advisors, but you see, most financial advisors, I believe, are what I call financial advertisers. Because what happens, these big companies come to them and they say, hey, here's the latest new shiniest product, go and sell this to your clients. And you know what? That's what they do. I know this to be the case because that's what I used to do myself. But the good news is we've actually moved on from that and we now do something that's really, really brilliant. So I spent 20 years as an independent financial advertiser doing what all the other independent financial advisors do. And do you know what that is? Sell products. You see, the thing is here, they're missing the point, because a proper financial plan understands everything about you. You know, it helps you to live your hopes, your dreams. Yeah, it eliminates all those fears and anxieties, and it enables you to feel free, secure, and safe. Now, that's a stark contrast from what I used to do. And we now do this through a simple 3-step plan, which we call your financial life plan. This is about designing the life that you want. And as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of this screen, it can mean different things to different people. So it can be financial freedom, it can be leaving a legacy, it can be liberating you to go and do all the things that you want to do, and much, much more. As for evidence, here you can see that I did actually achieve #1 bestseller status for the book, but we'll talk more about that later. So what we're going to do today is talk to you about how to better manage your money so that you will know exactly how to dream, plan, and live the exact life that you want, yet without having to win the national lottery in order to be able to afford it. So first step is this, and my secret #1 is this: pensions make for poor people. Now, you might be thinking, my goodness me, this guy has lost his mind. He's been more than 35 years in wealth management, in financial planning. Why on earth is he saying pensions make for poor people? Well, I don't know about you, but if you've met financial advisors in the past, what I've actually sort of seen is the conversation goes like this: how much money can you afford to put away? And you give them a paltry little amount of budget. And then the conversation goes along the lines of, shall we put it into a pension? Shall we put it into an ISA? Brilliant, you think. Well, let's have a look at this. First question is this: does everyone know what the acronym ISA stands for? So I guess a number of you are thinking in the back of your minds, it stands for individual savings account. And on one level, you're right. However, in my world, I believe it stands for idiots save aimlessly, because the truth here is this: most people aim at nothing and hit it with tremendous accuracy. So we want to make sure that you're not one of those people who aim at nothing. Because let me ask you a question. How many people, either yourself or people that you know, have got a clearly written plan that's down on paper? You've taken professional advice, those that are the nearest and dearest to you know about it, and it's a plan for when you're dead. And it's called a last will and testament. So put your hand in the air if you've got a last will and testament. Well, I'm guessing most of you put your hand in the air, which is brilliant. But then the question is this: do you have a plan for when you're alive? Because the evidence shows that actually, if you've got a clearly written down plan, it's down on paper, somebody holds you accountable to doing it, then actually from a coaching point of view, statistically, you've got almost an 80% chance of achieving it. So my question is this: why would you not do it? So the first step to take here is actually dream. So we need to get the dreams down, and the best way to do that is to utilize something called a bucket list. And here's an example from somebody that I've known who has now sadly passed away, but respected greatly. I don't know whether you ever followed a young man on Facebook called Stephen Sutton. He had a Facebook page called Stephen's Story. Now, Stephen was very passionate about having this bucket list of things that he wanted to do initially when he'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Now, after ticking off a few things, he certainly sort of changed his focus in terms of helping others and really putting the fun in fundraising. So he actually set up this situation where he wanted to raise £10,000 for the Teenage Cancer Trust. Now, I was able to play a small part in this plan of Stephen's. In actual fact, what then happened, he managed to raise in excess of, and to this day, money still comes in, I believe, he's been able to raise in excess of £5 million for the Teenage Cancer Trust, which is just an amazing legacy to leave behind. We see Stephen was very passionate about the fact that we all have a number of seconds each and every day. 86,400 seconds to be precise. And if that money was deposited in your bank account each morning, and actually you had to spend it, and you had to spend it wisely, and if you didn't, it just evaporated, how many people would use that money wisely? Now, the reality of the situation is we don't have anybody depositing £86,400 into our bank account in the morning. But what we do have is that 86,400 seconds each and every day. What are we doing to make sure that we're using that time wisely? Are we moving ourselves towards our goals, or are we moving ourselves away from? Now, on your bucket list, you might have certain things like being financially free at the age of 50, meeting a world leader, climb a mountain and watch a sunrise. There's some examples there on the screen for you. But the thing to do here is to build your bucket list and find a format that works well for you, whether it's paper or electronic. I really don't mind. I always use the analogy, think in ink. When you write something down, it really impresses it into your brain. So write down absolutely anything that you want to do in your life. Now, what I would say here is don't have a restrictive thinking. So don't think you're too old, you're too young, you're too fat, you're too thin. Who makes the rule book here? Write down everything that you want to be, have, or do, or experience in your life. Get it down on paper. Then when you've got it, share it. Share it with somebody that's going to hold you accountable. The power of doing that alone is absolutely huge. And then the final step in this process here is you then need to cost it. You then need to plan out a freedom fund that will allow you to do all the things that you want to do in your life. Because the thing is here, your financial plan should be supporting your life plan. So just to summarize, secret number one, key point is this: idiots save aimlessly. Please don't be an idiot in that regard. Start with the end in mind. It's the old Stephen Covey principle of begin with the end in mind, and then also create a bucket list. Nikki was a client that we worked with many, many years ago. In fact, Nikki was a guy who started literally laboring and sweeping up on the shop floor. And when I met Nikki, he was the managing director of this company. And as you can see from his LinkedIn profile here, a £45 million business. Now, when I sat down and went through the discovery program with Nikki, I got to the end of the first meeting and I said to Nikki, why do you need me in your life? Because you are so switched on. And what he said to me was this: Carl, I am brilliant at running my company. I have a great team of board of directors around me. I'm really good at working with them. But do you know what? How long have you been doing what you've been doing to get to where you are? At that time, it was about 20 years. And he said to me, Carl, I don't have 20 years to learn everything that's inside your head. What I have is a strategic alliance team of my financial planner, my tax planner, my lawyer around me, looking out for the common good of me and my business. So what we've been able to do with Nikki and his team over the years is to help them make progress. And they're running the race for their own individual reasons. And sometimes it's not about having the best car on the road. Sometimes it's not about having the flashiest house. Sometimes it's about giving your family, your children, the opportunities that you never had as a child. So secret number two I'd like to share with you is this: it's not what you've got, It's what you do with it that counts. You see, it's about leveraging what you've got, because so many people focus on their net income. And, what I'm here to tell you is, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I need a footballer's salary, or I need to have won the national lottery to be financially free, I'm telling you, you're wrong. Anybody can be financially free if you're prepared to pay the price. Now, discipline weighs ounces, they say, but regret weighs tons. So by being disciplined, it's a far better way to be able to get you to where you need to be so that you can have all the good things that you want from life. Now, let me tell you about some other clients of mine. I'll call them Terry and June. So they retired in their mid 50s. They had average incomes then, and when they were in their mid 50s, they had a house that was paid for. There was no mortgage on it. They had a small bolt hole in Cornwall, their holiday home. There was no mortgage on that. They both had £15,000 a year coming in as retirement income. And when I was going through the financial questionnaire with them, I said, have you got any money saved in things like ISAs? And the answer was yes. And the gentleman said to me, we've got £500,000. And I said, oh, is that £500,000 for you? Or is it split between you and your wife? He said, no, we've got £500,000 each. Now, imagine this. You're in your mid 50s. You got no mortgages. Actually, you've got a holiday home as well. You've got 30 grand a year coming in income, and you've got £1 million, which is effectively in a tax-free pot. Now, assume a 4% income yield on that. That's £40,000 a year net income coming in off that. And I was staggered by this. I mean, I'm going back many years ago now when these clients were explaining this to me. And I probed as to kind of sort of how this happened. And he taught me the principle of paying yourself first. See, Warren Buffett is probably one of the most experienced investors in modern history. And he's got this quote here. It says, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. Because the thing is, when we're running a business or if we've got a profession, what we look at is what our net income is. And our net income is money that's come in. We've paid the wages to the staff. We've paid money out for rent and rates or mortgages. We've paid the taxman. Everybody else is at the front of the queue. And what I tend to find from experience is very often people are sitting down towards the bottom of the queue. Now, I would have you consider the possibility that, in fact, what you need to do is to elevate yourself towards the front of the queue and you start paying yourself first. There are so many books on this subject, it just isn't funny. It's a principle that's been around for years. The Richest Man in Babylon is a great book to read. The principle of tithing, has been around as long as there's been humans really on planet Earth. But the key thing here for these clients was this. They had a secret. They knew with crystal clear clarity their magic number. So let's run through an example. Now, this is not exact. I'm going to just show you a concept, and I want you to just try and grasp the concept. And if you want to run through your own numbers, then you can work this out yourself, or indeed, I'm happy to jump on a call and do it with you. So let's suppose that your current lifestyle, the expenditure that you pay out each year now costs you £24,000 a year. Now, what you need to work out is what your expenditure might be in retirement. So we have to make some assumptions on that, but let's assume it's £18,000 a year. We then need to know what the before tax situation is in order to get £18,000 net. Now, I'm just being really, really crude here in terms of doing a mathematical calculation. So if you take that 18,000 and you divide it by 0.08 on a calculator, what you then end up with is a figure. And that figure is £22,500. So what we're saying here is £22,500, assuming you pay 20% income tax, then that will give you £18,000 net income. Now, for any financial directors or accountants watching that, I know this isn't true. I know we've got a personal allowance, we've got tax calculations to do, and that's what we do when we do a deep dive with our clients going through this in detail. But for now, I just want you to understand the concept. So, what's this? What is this thing that you can see here? It's a hot air balloon. It's a hot air balloon that's been filled with what? Hot air. So that creates something called inflation. So that is a nice little segue in terms of actually going through the next stage. Because if your gross income requirement is £22,500, if we assume an inflation rate of 3%, and it's arguable what inflation you are actually paying, because it depends on how you spend your money. So some people might spend it in certain areas and others in other areas. So you'd have personal rates of inflation. But just for now, let's just assume an inflation rate is 3%. If you take a calculator and enter 1.03 and press the times button twice, and then enter the figure that we've got here, £22,500, or indeed whatever number you've worked your gross income out to be, and then press it by the number of years until your selected retirement date. In this example, I'm going to assume 20 years. What that then gives us is a situation where we've got a requirement of £22,500 gross income, we've got a 3% inflation, and we've got a 20-year time frame. So what that means is, in order to have the equivalent of £22,500 gross now, in 20 years' time, allowing for 3% inflation, we need £40,637. Now, that's really important that you factor that into your planning, because otherwise you're going to get to retirement and you're going to be miserable because you'll have completely undershot it. So what we now need to do is to calculate your freedom fund. So let's look at this, because the freedom fund is essentially a bucket of money. All right. It's a bucket of money that we have sat here. And basically anything that is sitting in this bucket here, bank, building society, national savings, shares, that all sits within your bucket. You know, other stuff that can be in your bucket, let me just move me out the way, is things like salary, dividends, equity, pension income, tax credits, all that good stuff could actually be sitting in your bucket as well. And then things like inheritances and windfall, that sits in the bucket. This is cash investments that's sitting in your bucket. It's also important to understand what's not in your bucket. So a lot of people think that their home is in their bucket, and that is not necessarily the case, because unless you actually sell the property and downsize it and therefore create equity from that sale, then that doesn't fit in your bucket. You can't take a brick out the wall and go and buy yourself a nice cruise. So it has to be turned into cash. Your pension fund as well, unless you can turn that into cash, that doesn't go in your bucket. But once you do, it can. And then a lot of people will argue that their company or their business is their retirement fund. And indeed, it can play an important part in it. However, until you've sold it and generated equity and that's sitting in the bucket, it doesn't actually sit there, because it may not happen. So just to recap, we've got the adjusted inflation income of £40,637. And now there are two ways to calculate your freedom fund. So basically, what you could argue is this: I need £40,637, and I suspect that I'm going to live for 30 years. You can go onto the Office for National Statistics website and go to the life expectancy calculator, put in your date of birth and sex, and it'll give you an idea as to what your chances are to living to 100, and also give you your average life expectancy. But the reality is now people are living longer, so therefore you could spend as much time or almost as much time in retirement as you have done in your working life. So let's say that the situation here is that we've got somebody and we think that they're going to live for 30 years. You take your £40,637, you multiply it by 30, and that equals £1.2 million. Now, that might be a shock for some people, but don't worry, I've got a way of actually sort of taking away the pain in this regard. The other way of actually sort of working out what your retirement fund should be is take your income requirement of 40,637, divide it by 0.04. So in other words, that assumes a 4% income yield. And then what that will then do is give you the lump sum needed in order to generate that income. So this is very, very simple and crude way of doing things, but that will give you the figure of just over £1 million. So what we've now got is the truth about money. But I've got some caveats. Number one, these figures have not taken into account any existing savings that you've got. They will play a crucial part in the overall figures. The tax calculation here is crude. It's just a simple concept that I'm trying to explain, nothing more. It's just to get your brain thinking. If you're sitting down with an appropriately qualified person, we'll do the tax calculations. We'll make sure that everything is planned out, as scientifically as possible for you. So my question is this: how many people knew the truth about their freedom fund? Whenever I give talks on this, it always amazes me that no one has genuinely had that explained to them in the past. And we all need to go away and find out what that figure is. So key point number one here is know your magic number. Know what your ideal lifestyle is going to cost at some point in the future. Key point number two is calculate your freedom fund. You need crystal clear clarity on this. You know, most people, like I said earlier, aim at nothing and hit it with tremendous accuracy. If you shoot for the stars and you hit the moon, it's better to have done that than not taken the shot at all. And then the final point I've got here is to have something which we call a holy shit fund. Now, this is something which is known as an emergency fund, if you want to be a little less crude than what I've just said there. But one of my clients renamed it the holy shit fund just because he said, Carl, this is a pot of money that when the proverbial hits the fan, I have got a war chest that means that I am safe and secure. My family are safe and secure. It just means that life goes on. And don't we know that in the current economic climate? So secret number three is this: guilt-free spending. So guilt-free spending is about looking at the lifestyle. So let's say this is your current lifestyle, right? But when you stop working in the early retirement years, those are the years that you're going to do it large. In my experience, when people first start working, they've got the time, they've got the health, they've got the energy to be able to do all the things that they want to do. So typically they're doing that long haul holiday stuff, they're exploring things, and they want to tick those things off the bucket list really, really quickly while their knees are still intact and their hips aren't knackered. So it's one of those things, that's the life stage that people are in. Now, as you get older, the reality of the situation is this: that most people then don't go on holiday to the Bahamas or Bermuda, easy for me to say. They tend to go for a weekend to Brighton or Bournemouth because they're actually living a more sedentary lifestyle. But then there's also things that we need to factor in along the way, certain one-offs. So it might be the grandchildren are going to university. You might want to help your grandkids get on the property ladder, all sorts of things along those lines. But the fact of the matter is here is that people are living longer. But the truth is they're living longer, but not necessarily in great health. So what I find is very often people underestimate how long they're going to live. And it's important to get this right, because if you need care in later life, it's a massive expense. It's huge. So you've got to make sure that you actually cash flow model your ideal retirement in the best way possible. So here's Kay and John. Kay and John are clients that we've worked with over the years. And when I first sat down with Kay and John, I said to them, why am I here? Because they were introduced to me by a referral. And they said, Carl, in the preceding 18 months, we've both been diagnosed with cancer and had treatment for it. We've both lost parents. We've both been made redundant. And we understand that you're really good at running this thing called a financial life plan. Now, what we did was get for them their bucket list together and actually make sure that their financial plan could be engineered in a way that would enable them to do the things that they want to do. So as you can see here, Captain's dinner, or the Commodore's dinner, on the Queen Mary 2, the Cunard liner, which is quite ironic because I live in Teignmouth on the south coast of Devon, and at the time of recording this, the Queen Mary 2 is literally moored just virtually at the bottom of my garden. But they also wanted to do other things, so they were passionate about doing scuba diving, so they went to the Red Sea and various other places doing diving and everything that went along with that. So it's about, let's just summarize everything that we now need to consider. So putting it all together, remember this: idiots save aimlessly. Don't be an idiot. And it's about beginning with the end in mind. We need that clarity. So the best way to do this is to start dreaming in color. Get that bucket list together. Sit down with your significant other, sit down with your children, sit down with your family, and together write a bucket list that's meaningful to all of you. Then you need to know your magic number. You need to know what your ideal number will be at some point in the future come retirement. And then you need to be able to calculate your freedom fund. And I've showed you a simple way that you can actually do that. But the other thing to make sure is that you've got that war chest, you've got that holy shit fund in place so that if you fall apart, then your financial plan doesn't fall apart with you. And then it's one of those things about guilt-free spending. Imagine this. You've retired and you've got a few quid and you book a holiday and you go on holiday with your family, but you're sitting there and all the time you're thinking, well, we've had some nice meals out. We've paid for this lovely holiday, but I'm worried that I haven't got enough money. So you're there having time with your family, the people that you love and you care most about. But actually, at the back of your mind, it's niggling away. You've got a little bit of buyer's remorse there because you're thinking, shit, can I afford this? You know, if I keep doing this, will it deplete my funds, my financial funds, before I deplete my life? So that's just a travesty to be there in that situation where you're actually spending time with those that you love and care about, but actually you're feeling guilty about it. So that is just something that I think is just really, really, really sad. So let me just put it to you like this. The next steps really are that you engage with this material, because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, more is said than done. And there's a couple of ways that we can actually move forward here. So as you can see at the bottom here, we've got this link. It's called a link to my website where there is a book offer. So my book currently retails on Amazon for £10.99, but you can get a copy of the book for just £1. If you go to dreamitplanetliveitbook.com/offer, if you complete the details there, I'll send you a copy of the book for just £1. This is part of me giving back, helping people. I understand that we're in difficult times in this new economy that we're working with. And actually, if I can help you along life's journey, then that's part of my values as an individual to kind of give back. Equally, if you like what you've heard today and you think, do you know what? I'd like to do a deeper dive into this. I'd really like to get some real clarity about my own life plan. I want to make sure that the finances are not just done on the back of a fag packet, as it were, but have been calculated by somebody who's proficient, professionally qualified, and actually knows what they're doing. Then reach out to me. My email address, as you can see there, is carl@carllehman.co.uk. Drop me a message, and what we can do is book a free 1-hour discovery call where I will sit down with you, evaluate what your situation is, and then we can decide if we're going to be a good fit to work together going forward. So I hope that's been useful for you. And what I would just like to say in closing is this: most people have a plan for when they're dead, but most people don't have a plan for when they're alive. What we do is help people to dream it, plan it, live it, so they can live the life that they want without fear of running out of money, no matter what happens, because life is not a rehearsal. Thanks for listening.